Hello again, everyone, for my third video this morning. I'm really on a roll with this Ace Attorney stuff, but after I was reviewing Apollo Justice from a Catholic perspective, I started to realize, if you've seen the video, that Apollo Justice contradicts the very nature of the storyline of Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney Dual Destinies. And since of the Ace Attorney games, Dual Destinies is by far the most Catholic of the games, I'm going to review that from a Catholic perspective even before I review the game by itself. So obviously there are a lot of spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled by the game, just have patience until I do just a review. So first off, the game starts out by talking about the Dark Age of the Law, which admittedly Phoenix helped to bring about by the mistake he made in court where he presented forged evidence, as well as when the prosecution aided in that. And in Apollo Justice, we established that Phoenix went even further than just that accidental presentation in court, how he continued forging evidence. And now all of a sudden he wants to stop it? So that aside, this game actually is very chock full of Catholic undertones and sometimes even overtones. Like, they actually use legitimate wording straight from the catechism. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. But it definitely gave me goosebumps more than any other Ace Attorney in terms of how close they were to Catholic standards. And I'm going to start out by talking about the third case, which I believe is called Turnabout Academy, where it takes place at a college, and this college is basically the ones that are keeping the Dark Age of the Law so, well, dark. They teach, well, okay, there are two professors. One of them is Professor, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank. Professor Aristotle Means. And as you could probably guess by his last name, his slogan is "The end justifies the means." He's the type of man that he teaches the lawyer course, and his suggestion is, if you want your client to be declared innocent, then you must do whatever it takes, because an innocent verdict is great, and if that means you have to break the rules or do something immoral, that's really good. But Professor Constance Court, ugh, these names, they're so incriminating. Her approach is the exact opposite of Professor Means's. Her approach is the end never justifies the means. And that is word for word exactly what the Catechism teaches. Is that the example they use is, if you rob a bank, that's a bad thing. But then you might give the money to someone who's poor. But that's a good thing, is giving to the poor. But the fact that you did something evil to achieve that doesn't justify your actions for doing something bad. So Professor Court's mentality is, if you're going to get your client declared innocent, you have to do it by fair and just means. And Professor Means dislikes that idea so much so that I believe that's his underlying reason for killing Professor Court. I mean, I know there's more than that, but that's definitely an underlying reason. Now, admittedly, most of the other cases don't strike me as, over-the-top Catholic. I mean, they've got some decent morality in there, but overall, it's not really until the final case that it really starts driving home an emphasis on morality, especially when Edgeworth enters the scene. Oh, did I mention that there would be plenty of spoilers? Anyway, so Edgeworth comes along, and from the beginning of the game, Phoenix is on the phone with this mysterious person, whom you eventually find out is Edgeworth. And Edgeworth, since he and Phoenix are actually friends, he asks Phoenix if he'll help defend a man who is falsely accused of being a murderer. But the thing is, during that trial, the verdict was falsified, and so Edgeworth's goal was to make sure to redo the trial using a fair system with legitimate evidence and proving once and for all what the actual verdict was. So in other words, Edgeworth was a seeker of the truth. And this is where it gets really cool, is Phoenix and Edgeworth are going at it to prove that Phoenix's client is innocent. But then all of a sudden, Apollo Justice comes in. And I know what you might be thinking if you saw my Apollo Justice video. It's like, Paul, I thought you just badmouthed Apollo Justice for over 10 minutes. Well, I may have badmouthed the game, but Apollo as a character is, in just 1 year since the events of the past games, he's incredibly matured. So much so that he asks for a leave of absence from Phoenix's office because he wants to investigate the murder of his friend Clay, who is his best friend in school. But he believes that the method that Phoenix is using is not the method that he wants. But after Phoenix does a pretty intense cross-examination of his own client, and not to mention he's got stick-in-the-mud Edgeworth on the prosecution's bench, but then Apollo breaks down at the end of it. I mean, not like crying breaks down, but he like pounds the witness stand and says, "Mr. Wright, you do know that Athena's my coworker. I want to believe just as much as you do that she's innocent. But what is faith without doubt?" And at that point, I just was pretty much speechless, because I actually went on a Catholic retreat that had that exact same message. Is if you're going to be Catholic, doubt the sources and then do the research, so that you're not just blindly following along Catholic teaching just because your parents said so or because it's convenient, but because you legitimately believe that this is the truth. And even though the game wasn't explicitly trying to talk about Catholicism, Apollo wanted to actually have reason to believe that Athena was innocent, which is almost the total opposite of Phoenix's perspective, where he was just like, I trust my worker, because, Phoenix is now a boss. Whereas Apollo says, I want to trust her with reason. Because, Apollo is much more logic-driven than Phoenix. That much is obvious if you play Apollo Justice's standalone game. And then Edgeworth makes an interesting comment, where he says, my friend, you have just discovered the true meaning of the courtroom. And even though this is already said in the previous Ace Attorney games, using much more words and much more drawn-out episodes, but Edgeworth says the reason why attorneys and prosecutors go at it so much is that they're in pursuit of the truth. So even further along, Edgeworth and Phoenix are both wanting to make sure that even if this means bad things for Phoenix, Phoenix needs to make sure that, yes, it's a good thing that he's got a good heart, but he also has to, as Edgeworth very frequently says in pretty much every game he's in, Right! Don't allow your childish emotionalism to get in the way of the truth. And that's another thing about the Catholic faith, is emotions can sometimes blind us to the reality of what is. Now, that's not to say emotions are bad, because Jesus himself, as you know in my Myers-Briggs videos, is an INFJ. INFJs are very emotionally driven. There were several times when Jesus took the emotions of the people into consideration, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the facts, as messy as they are the truth, and we need to accept them. We can't just blindly go along with what we feel is right. We have to go with what is right. No pun intended. I just realized that's Phoenix's last name. Also, the character of Athena Sykes, while not overtly Catholic, her way of thinking is very, almost too empathetic, or sympathetic, whatever the word is, because Athena has super sensitive hearing, where she can really, really, really pick up on people's emotions. So much so that I was once doing a presentation on Facebook of trying to find a Myers-Briggs type or trying to find a video game character that fit every Myers-Briggs type. And I made the bold claim that Athena was an ENFJ, despite that popular opinion pretty much unanimously says she's ENFP. My argument was they were probably trying too hard to replace Maya. Isn't that familiar? But if you look at the function stack, extroverted feeling is very clearly her dominant function. She is very attuned to emotions, and is also very emotional herself. And to people like me, I find that seriously. Just ignore the prosecution's taunts. They shouldn't get under your skin that much. But the positive aspect of Athena's emotional sensitivity is that Athena can tell when a person is truly trying to plead not guilty but is putting on a brave face. Athena risked quite a lot to ensure that Simon Blackquill got the verdict he deserved. She studied law so young that she became a lawyer at the age of 18, which, to put it into perspective, Phoenix became a lawyer at the age of 24, and Apollo at the age of 21 or 22, one of the two. And Athena very clearly was trying to get Phoenix to realize that we have to take emotions into consideration in the courtroom. And while I don't know if you can get away with that in real life, because, Ace Attorney doesn't really take itself seriously, Athena is very good at being attuned to what people are actually feeling as opposed to what they display. And so, as a result, if a contradiction can't be spouted by the evidence, Athena has this thing called the mood matrix, where she points out contradictory emotions. And in case you might be thinking, Paul, you're starting to be a bit touchy-feely here, the characters make a good point about how emotions can sometimes help us to be closer to the truth. Because you get to the end of the game where they figure out that the Phantom is the mastermind behind all of this. And the Phantom has a psych profile where he has almost no emotional fluctuation whatsoever. He doesn't feel emotions like everyone else. So as a result, he puts down the three lawyers of the Wright Anything Agency, because of the three of them, two are very emotionally driven, and that's Phoenix and Athena. But the thing is, he doesn't realize that even he has emotions too. And so the three lawyers sort of triple team him and say, well, we can't just deal with emotions on our own. We need other people to help us understand why we're feeling what we do and how we can put that into practice. Now, they worded it a lot better than I did, so I urge you to play that case or do a Let's Play for yourself. But suffice to say, they make a really good point against some of those guys out there that says, you're a man, so you shouldn't be crying or you shouldn't be feeling. Well, on the contrary, feelings are very important. In fact, a lot of people that bottle their feelings too much end up exploding at the worst possible time. And so every now and then, the people that cry at the tip of a hat actually have a good scientific point. So my voice is getting a bit sore, so I'll probably stop here in terms of the whole comparisons to morality. Oh, actually, before I forget, there actually is one more thing I'm willing to put up with a scratchy throat for. And that's the friendship between Juniper, Hugh, and Robin. So, all three of them have some kind of big secret that they're trying to keep. In the case of Robin, it's the fact that she's always been forced to live as a boy, even though she's actually a girl, and even wears a brace across here. I'm guessing you females have probably already figured it out, why she had to do that. And when it comes off, she feels a sense of freedom, which is kind of a slap in the face to the transsexuals, where they say gender identity is only what you feel. Well, Robin Newman very clearly had a physical reason for why she was a girl, and she was happy that she was able to express her actual gender. She was biologically a female, and she was tired of being forced to be biologically a male thanks to that brace that she was wearing. And being a male, I can only imagine that must have been excruciatingly painful. And then you've got Hugh, who is actually a 25-year-old that was still in high school because he wasn't nearly as perfect and smart as he made himself out to be. And then you've got Juniper, who is actually a very naive, fun-loving girl that turned all cold. It's losing me what the reason is, probably because it's getting late. But suffice to say, the three of them have friendship bracelets that they clutch when they're nervous. And their friendship, besides the fact that it's a really deep, caring friendship that they wouldn't give up for the world, it also kind of reminds me of the Holy Trinity. Not to say that the three of them are one, or three persons, one God, but they're very clearly in communion with each other. They consult each other. Sorry, my webcam went out again. They act in what's the best interest for others. In other words, they put the needs of each other before their own. In fact, there are several times, not that I condone lying, but there are several times when Hugh and Robin, and even Juniper to an extent, put themselves at risk for the sake of saving another. Now, the fact that they committed perjury in court, I don't know if I atone for that, but the actions in their heart were, I need to protect my friend. And quite honestly, who doesn't want a friend like that, Christian or otherwise? So again, you can probably tell my voice is getting a bit... Ugh, I need some water. So I'll stop there. But I think I've given you more than enough evidence to show that as un-Catholic as Apollo Justice was, Dual Destinies is very Catholic. And even though it may not be my favorite Ace Attorney, in terms of like gameplay and story, it's definitely my favorite in terms of the morality that they're presenting, and doing a really good job of being almost word for word what the Catechism actually teaches. So, thanks a lot for listening to my ramble. Please make sure to let me know if there's anything else I can review from a Catholic perspective, and until then, keep the faith, God bless, stay epic, and don't show any contradictions. Bye.